Hello, everyone. I'm here to tell you some of the new ways in which Aadhaar can be used. And I think that's part of the entire Aadhaar 2.0 and reimagining new ways in which Aadhaar can be used. We already know, as CEO Sir said, we have 8 crore Aadhaar authentications every day. But there are still many more opportunities for usage of Aadhaar. How can we expand it to an order of magnitude greater than where it is being used today? And I think that our thought, and as CEO said, as part of Aadhaar 2.0, we are creating this sandbox of new ideas, of new ways of using this digital platform to provide different kinds of services to the citizens of the country. And I want to actually show some examples of how this can be done. And this is really, this is really to actually rekindle the imagination of how Aadhaar can be used. And when we do this, we have to look at 3 things. That how can we allow residents to use their own Aadhaar to avail services? And the focus, the principles need to be simplicity. It needs to be simple, extremely easy to use. The focus needs to be privacy, right? Especially that privacy is one of the critical things. And of course, security. And we've figured out some ways in which Aadhaar can be used by a much larger set of people in the country by leveraging 3 technologies that Aadhaar already has. The first one is offline KYC verification. I don't know, this is something that Aadhaar had launched about 2 to 3 years ago, and it actually provides a way by which people can verify Aadhaar offline. And now it is something which is being used by some people, but I think the usage we want to simplify the usage of this. The second part is that Aadhaar has announced that we have this new kind of this new modality of matching called local face matching, which actually happens locally on your device. And of course, we're trying to combine these 2 with the existing mAadhaar application to actually unlock completely new experiences through which Aadhaar can be used. And that's what I hope to show you in the next half an hour. Coming back to the core principles, right? The first core principle is simplicity. Simplicity is, of course, that we need to have a very different kind of resident user experience for the Aadhaar. That's number 1. And the second thing, of course, is that I should be able to use Aadhaar offline. So I don't need to have any connectivity to UIDAI or to CIDR to do that. The second part, of course, is privacy. Especially when you're using Aadhaar on a day-to-day basis, you don't really want to actually use the Aadhaar number to actually avail the service. The next point is that we'll establish, you have now the ability to establish proof of presence in Aadhaar through local face matching. And finally, this KYC itself can actually be done in a granular manner so that you can provide granular control of Aadhaar usage by the resident. So therefore, if I want to reveal only my name and photograph, then I can actually reveal only a granular portion of my KYC information. And of course, the consent is the other core part of the entire Aadhaar experience. So it provides a systematic way of locally storing user consent that people. And finally, it's very interesting that when all these pieces come together, you actually come up with something which is equivalent to a 2-factor authentication. The credential itself, the offline KYC, is secure because it is digitally signed for authenticity. And also, there are mechanisms by which now this can be shared in an encrypted manner, so it can only be used by the entity who has requested it. So we'll talk about 4 different use cases that are related, that actually come out of these group of these sets of technologies that we're talking about. So the first method is actually offline KYC through deep linking. And here, what is it that we are trying to do? It allows a resident to share their own offline KYC with any entity app on their own smartphone. And that is the core principle, that you can share your offline KYC on your own smartphone. And who can use this? This is any resident who actually has Aadhaar installed on their phone, as well as the entity application running on the same phone. So therefore, the prerequisite is, of course, that Aadhaar would have been installed and the user profile would have been created. And the user profile can not just be created for the resident themselves, but it may also be for any other family member who may use the same smartphone. So let's look a little deeper as to how this would work. The first step is the resident would initiate the collection of this offline KYC from an entity app. An entity app can be anything. It could be an e-commerce app. It could be a mobility app. It could be an event or travel booking app. And the only thing, the primary thing that the resident needs to provide is they need to provide their name, and they need to see whether this KYC requires a proof of presence or not. There are some other factors there which are all kind of, which certainly can be derived from the entity app, things like encryption and app name and transaction ID and other things. But the core thing is actually your name and your proof of presence. Now, when this happens, automatically through deep linking, what happens is that your control is transferred from the entity app to Aadhaar. And as long as the name matches the profile which is available in Aadhaar, a request for consent to share your KYC shows up. And if once you provide your consent, then what happens is, if proof of presence is required, you end up doing a local face matching, which actually says that it is indeed you who is providing this consent. And if proof of presence is not required, as in many applications, you don't need to do that. And then finally, the control gets returned back to the entity app, and the offline KYC is now within the entity. So this is literally as simple as how as how simple this entire process is. So I'll go through a couple of videos which actually show how this thing works. We've actually done a POC of this, and we'll show how this thing works. Can we play the first video, please?
Sharing offline KYC with an entity through deep linking with proof of presence. The resident needs to install the Aadhaar app and the entity application on their own smartphone. Aadhaar Offline KYC is initiated by the resident himself using the entity app. The resident enters his or her name and clicks on Proof of Presence. Through deep linking, the control shifts to the Aadhaar app. If the name in the offline KYC request matches an already created profile in Aadhaar, consent of the resident is requested. The consent of the resident is recorded. Since proof of presence is required, a local face match is initiated. The local face match captures the face image, performs a liveness check, and matches the captured face against offline KYC photo. Finally, digitally signed and encrypted offline KYC information is shared with the entity application. Please note that the Aadhaar number of the resident was not required anywhere in the process.
So I think this shows you how simple this could be, right? So now let's take the same thing where you don't even need proof of presence. So certainly in certain cases, KYC using proof of presence may be important. So let's play the second video. It's actually quite similar, but it's simpler.
Sharing offline KYC through deep linking with no proof of presence. The process is initiated by the resident using the entity app, which is requesting Aadhaar Offline KYC. The resident enters his or her name and clicks No on proof of presence. Now control shifts to the Aadhaar app through deep linking. The consent of the resident is recorded in Aadhaar app. Then digitally signed and encrypted offline KYC information is shared with the entity application. Please note that the Aadhaar number of the resident was not required anywhere in the process.
So this shows you how simple it could be. And I think this can actually unlock so many different applications where Aadhaar can be used, and you can take the benefit of both offline KYC verification as well as the local face matching capability within Aadhaar. So let's move to a second use case. And the second use case is slightly different. In this case, the entity app is running on another device, which is controlled by an operator. And the Aadhaar app is running on your own smartphone. So of course, the same requirement that the profile needs to be created on Aadhaar, and of course, that's the requirement is there. So then in this case, what happens is the operator collects the name of the resident. Right? The difference here is the program is the process is initiated on the business device, right? Whatever that is, maybe a tablet, maybe a PC, maybe something. And then once you do that, actually the entity application generates a QR code. And this QR code is actually the offline KYC request. So it has everything that's there, which is previously generated through deep linking. In this case, what's happening is you have name and proof of presence are the two key concepts. Beyond that, there are encryption keys and app names, etc. The other thing, of course, is a callback URL as to where actually the offline KYC needs to be shared. That's the only difference in the request that is there in the previous set of cases and the ones that are here. So in this case, what happens? Once that happens, the control will shift to Aadhaar. And if the name matches, the consent will be collected. And after that, the local face match will be triggered if proof of presence is required. And of course, upon successful completion, Aadhaar will use the callback URL to upload the offline KYC. And of course, user consent is again locally shared within the Aadhaar app. And of course, the entity displays the offline KYC. Now the offline KYC has reached the operator's device. And that's the core thing. Authentication, the local face match and the KYC sharing still is happening on your own device, but it gets shared to the other device which is run by. So let's play these videos. The first video is actually with the, where you're sharing it through QR code with face match. Let's play the video, please.
Sharing offline KYC using a QR code with proof of presence. Let's see how Aadhaar Offline KYC can be shared on a device controlled by an operator. The process is initiated on the entity app on the operator device where the resident name is entered and proof of presence is selected. The entity app generates and displays a QR code that contains the offline KYC request. Using resident's smartphone Aadhaar app, the resident scans the QR code, consent of the resident is recorded in Aadhaar app. Since proof of presence is required, a local face match is initiated. The local face match captures the face image, performs a liveness check, and matches the captured face against offline KYC photo. Finally, digitally signed and encrypted offline KYC information is shared with the entity application through a callback URL specified in the request. Please note that the Aadhaar number of the resident was not required anywhere in the process.
So you get the drift. I mean, the idea is that this can work not only when both the apps are on the same device, it also works when they are on different devices. Let's play the same version without the proof of presence and followed by actually the KYC content history video. Let's play those two in order, please.
Sharing offline KYC using a QR code with no proof of presence. The process is initiated on the entity app on the operator device where the resident name is entered and proof of presence is set to no. The entity app generates and displays a QR code that contains the offline KYC request. Using resident's smartphone Aadhaar app, the resident scans the QR code and consent of the resident is recorded in Aadhaar app. Digitally signed and encrypted offline KYC information is shared with the entity application through a callback URL specified in the request. Please note that the Aadhaar number of the resident was not required anywhere in the process.
Offline KYC consent history. The resident has the ability to review their own offline KYC consent history stored locally on their device. Open the Aadhaar app and click on Consent KYC Share History. The face icon indicates where proof of presence was part of the offline KYC request.
So the important thing is locally the resident is able to keep their own the consent history of all the consent that they have provided. So that's one of the key things, because consent being one of the core parts. So changing gears a little bit, we're going to talk about a slightly different use case, and though many of the components of that use case are actually quite similar. So one of the things that Aadhaar has many AUAs today, right? And we said that there are over 8 crore authentications that happen today. But we want to actually expand the AUAs, the ability to leverage this local face authentication, which Aadhaar is launching. Now, why would this be important? This is critical to expand the reach of Aadhaar authentication. So, for example, why would one want to do it? Sometimes it could be an exception process when fingerprint authentication fails. It could also be a situation where lots of places you have a limited number of endpoint or fingerprint devices, and you want to actually do some local face matching even when I don't have an endpoint device. And of course, the third kind of situation could be when the network fails, because it's a purely local authentication. And what is it actually doing when you do local face match? The live image of the resident is matched with the photograph in the AUA signed document, which leverages local face matching. And anyone can actually use it. You really don't need any phone or device. The AUA, of course, needs to have a photograph of yours, which may be through a prior KYC or some other means. And what happens is, of course, there is only one device here, which is the operator's device. And the operator's device basically runs and calls the local face matching. The control is shifted to the local face matching. And based on the result of the local face matching, you can understand the proof of presence of that resident at a given place. Let's play a video. Let's play a video showing what happens here.
Local face match capability for Aadhaar AUAs. This use case is performed completely on the operator's device. The resident does not need any device for this verification. It is assumed the AUA has obtained the resident photo through eKYC in the past or some other means. The entity app has a list of residents who can be verified on this device mapped to an entity ID. The local face match captures the face image, performs a liveness check, and matches the captured face against the AUA signed photograph using UIDAI Face RD app. Resident proof of presence process is completed upon successful local face match.
So think about that. I think this is some way that we can actually significantly expand the usage of Aadhaar, even by existing AUAs in places where maybe they don't have devices, or you can use it as an inclusion thing where fingerprint authentication fails, or even scenarios where network kind of scenarios. So therefore, that's actually a whole new set of ways by which Aadhaar authentication can be expanded. And finally, we'll move to a fourth kind of use case where this same set of technologies is actually used in an access control kind of use case. And the whole point of an access kind of control use case could be secure entry to an airport, to a railway station, to a stadium, to an office, by combining basically three concepts: the offline KYC, which we've talked about before, the event details, right? I'm going to go and watch this cricket match, the event details, and of course, a local face match, which happens on an access control device. And the interesting thing is, who can use it? Any resident having an Aadhaar and a booking app for whatever service, for whatever event that they want to. So what happens here? Two things happen. Firstly, the KYC sharing happens. The KYC sharing is just like what we talked in the first use case. So it's through a deep linking, because both the booking app and the Aadhaar app are on the same device. And then, but once this KYC happens, what the entity app would do in this particular case is they will generate a QR code. And the QR code actually contains a link to the event details as well as an encrypted version of the shared offline KYC. So that's really the combination. You're linking the event to the person, that this person is attending this event. And then when you come at the access entry point, the thing is that you read this QR code, which is the gate pass to check into this event. Well, as soon as you do that, you'll be triggering a local face auth. And on success of the local face auth, entry can be granted. So we'll watch this through a set of 2 videos. The first video is something which happens, which is the registering for the event. This happens not at the location. It happens at your home or happens at some point before the event takes place. And the second part is that what you do when you hit the access control gate and how this works, how this could work. So can we play the video, please?
Offline KYC for event registration. A resident can use Aadhar Offline KYC to register for an event and generate a QR code-based gate pass for secure entry. The resident needs to install the Aadhar app and the event booking application on their own smartphone. Aadhar Offline KYC is initiated by the resident himself using the event booking app. The resident enters his or her name. Now, control shifts to the Aadhar app through deep linking. The consent of the resident is recorded in Aadhar app. Digitally signed and encrypted offline KYC information is shared with the book application. A QR code gate pass is generated by the booking application, which links the offline KYC photo with event details. Access control through local face match. A resident can get secure entry into the cricket stadium using the QR code gate pass generated at the time of event registration. The QR code gate pass on the resident's booking app is scanned and a local face match on the access control device is initiated. Local face match on an access control device is used in this process. The local face match captures the face image, performs a liveness check and matches the captured face against offline KYC photograph. Check-in and entry is allowed if the local face match is successful and event details are validated. Aadhaar-based event registration and secure check-in is achieved without sharing the Aadhaar number of the resident.
So finally, I think these are all ideas that we are working on POC. Actually, but many of these concepts, both offline KYC, Aadhaar, and face match are all things that Aadhaar has had for a while. Aadhaar is going to put out a document outlining this initiative, and there will be a request for comments, and it will be on the UIDAI website. And to comment on this initiative, to get feedback as to what can be changed to make it more useful or any concern that may be there for this initiative, and as also to sign up, a very limited sign up for early access to these capabilities, so that to launch at the time of the launch, we have an email address, and we would request that anybody who wants to be part of these initiatives can communicate with us, both comments as well as ability to be part of this. I really think that these things can change the quantum in which people use Aadhaar in their lives, and it is done in a manner while respecting the 3 principles, right, of simplicity, privacy, and security. So that's all.